By the end of Proverbs 31, we stand back and marvel at King Lemuel's lyrical model of the virtuous woman. She's the excellent wife, more precious than jewels. She has the heart of her husband who trusts her, knowing that she will do him good and not harm all her days. Her industry is marvelous, her arms clothed with strength. She diligently labors in her household from early morning and even toils into the night. Far from an anxious bundle of raw nerves, ready to explode at the slightest provocation, she laughs at the time to come, her raiment woven of strength and dignity. Her mouth knows wisdom, and kindness is always to be found on her tongue. The result of all this glory, her people bless her name and praise her. Many women have done excellently, but you surpass them all. What would happen if we built her foil, if we described her polar opposite, the anti-Proverbs 31 woman? How would we sketch her character? Well, she's a poor wife, as common as lead. She has firmly secured the antipathy of her husband, who trusts only that she will bring him pain and harm all her days, which he finds himself wishing were short. Her industry is lackluster, her arms clothed with laziness. She rises late and neglects home and hearth, staying up late to mindlessly scroll her social media feeds. Her nerves are the constant companion of all those unfortunates who must live with her, ready to explode at the merest touch of stress. Her raiment is moodiness and disrespect. Her mouth knows sarcasm, battery acid is on her tongue. And the result of this infamy? Well, her people curse her name and hope to escape her. Many women have done excellently, but you are certainly not one of them. What kind of home would such a woman make around her? What kind of marriage? What kind of children? What kind of church, community, and even nation? Unfortunately, we see the answer all around us, as women like this are no mere caricature living on the printed page alone. They're almost comically easy to find. Why is this? Well, for one reason, our culture has taken to manufacturing them with seeming deliberateness. What is feminism but a factory for mass-producing loud, disrespectful, nagging women? The kind of woman a man would do anything to escape. In Titus 2, the Apostle Paul urges godly older women to teach younger women not to fall for it. The women of God, Paul says, are not to be drunk with rudeness, tearing their homes down around their own heads, but rather experts in loving husbands, raising children, and making homes that would crown the Christian community with glory. This is so serious, Paul warns, that the very word of God will be reviled if they fail in this charge. The stakes are high indeed. And so we need seasoned, godly women to take Paul's exhortation seriously. My wife just finished a book, Wisdom on Her Tongue, that is aimed right at the heart of these things. The extra long subtitle really captures the point of the book. The subtitle is this: Tips for Getting Back Your Weekends and Holidays and Learning to Communicate Effectively in Marriage. In each of the chapters in the book, you'll find that Lexy pulls no punches, urging her sisters further up and further in on the winding pathway to glory, to become a crown on her husband's head rather than cancer in his bones. It's a book about getting back your weekends and holidays. You know, the ones that you've been losing to days-long fits of the grumps, pointless fights with your husband, and other sinful immaturities. It's a book to wound you with the wounds of a friend, a sister who loves you enough to look you in the eye and say, "Sister, this has got to stop," to the things that are only hurting you and those around you. One last thing you should know about the book. Lexy lives out what she writes within. I've known this woman since we met in the library of North Layton Junior High during lunch period. Just see my published works. Both of us have had our share of growing up and maturing to do. When you get married at 19 and 20, these things come along with the wedding rings. We've lost our fair share of nights and weekends to silly fights. We've had to learn what it is to be a husband and to be a wife. We've had to wrestle our own flesh and forgive one another. And through it all, I can say without a doubt that my wife is a crown. Her children, and there are 7 of them at current count, rise up and call her blessed. We pray that the book will bless you and yours, encourage you in the race you're in the midst of running, and urge you on to glory. So in this episode of Bright Hearth, we're pausing from our current series to introduce the book to you, talk about what you'll find inside, and all the ways we hope it is a great help to you in the work of building a productive Christian household.
Welcome back to Bright Hearth, everybody, for an unusual Bright Hearth. Hi.
Yeah, people listening, they have no idea why it's unusual, but
It feels unusual.
this is the first and probably only ever video episode of Bright Hearth.
It is.
We're here in the studio. Now, you actually helped put this wallpaper in.
Yes, it was another project that your father got cajoled into helping me with.
Yes, learning the art of
He
wallpaper.
taught me how to hang wallpaper, so
Yeah,
we
yeah.
are.
Well, it is good. It's good to have you in the studio, babe. Usually I'm looking
there's a
to
lot of
my
men
right.
here.
It's just Eric over there. And I find myself not as interested to look at Eric as to look at you. So, I mean,
well, here I am.
here you are in the studio for Bright Hearth. I got some notes here too. Usually in the studio, I don't have any kind of notes in front of me, but I do for this episode because this is a special episode where we're talking about the book that you just wrote called, what's it called again? Wisdom on her tongue. Wisdom on her tongue. Now, do you have the whole subtitle memorized?
No, well, how to get back your weekends and holidays, I think.
It's puritanical in a good way.
I had a much longer, cheekier title that Brian pared down a bit. So
It's tips for getting back your weekends and holidays and learning to communicate effectively in marriage. It is somewhat puritanical. It would have like 2 more paragraphs if it were truly puritanical.
We joked about that on the podcast at one point and it kind of stuck. That's why I thought about it.
Yeah.
A long time ago.
Honestly, I think it's a great subtitle. We're doing this one video just for fun here with the book coming out. We figured we're going to be doing a video promo that you heard in the cold open. And so why not have Lexy come in? My phone is here just in case, none of our 7 children are not here in studio with us. So if they, if there's any emergency, then they will text, call, and we'll be able to just, exit the studio and go save them. So the title of the book is Wisdom on Her Tongue, and then that long subtitle that I just said. And we are just about to get it into the warehouse here at New Christendom Press. And it's in pre-order officially. So there's a link in the description. You can pre-order the book. It's just newchristendompress.com/wisdom. And it will be shipping July 11th is our target ship date. It might be actually a few days before that, but we're going to be doing a promo from now until July 11th. So 11:59 p.m. July 11th until that cutoff. All of the pre-orders that come in, we'll be sending out signed copies. Are you excited about signing all those copies?
Making it sound like a scary thing, but I'm not
It's
sure
really
why
not.
I should be scared of it.
It's really not. Well, here's the difference. Ben and I have signed well over 1,000 copies of Haunted Cosmos, and my signature is so terrible, and it takes me so little time to write that didn't seem like that big of a deal to me. But I've seen your signature. It's actually good. It's beautiful. It looks like the words that it represents, unlike my signature. So I figured you might have carpal tunnel by the end,
I'll be good.
and then I would feel bad. But it's a hardcover. It is a beautiful cover, I
Is it
think.
cloth? Somebody asked me that and I couldn't remember what.
It's not cloth. It's a textured, like a linen textured paper with a gold foil stamping. All the design is a gold foil
So
stamp.
it does look textured. Okay.
Yeah, it is similar texture. If you have the Haunted Cosmos book, it's a very similar embossed kind of texture to that book. And the reason being, I didn't like the linen. I looked at a couple linen versions, but I didn't love them.
Better.
So we ended up going with the paper on this one. But it's going to be a premium hardcover. And again, that through July 11th, we'll be sending out signed copies to everybody. So Bright Hearth listeners, check it out. Link in the description, and we will hook you up with a signed copy. Okay, in this episode, basically what we're going to be doing, we're taking a break from that short Rules for Homemakers series that we've been going through. We'll get back to it next episode. But we wanted to just talk about what the book is all about, who it's for, what we hope it accomplishes, some of the practical content that you can expect to find there. And then also at the end of this episode, we're going to be answering some listener questions, questions from people that people have sent in about the book, what they can expect, and we had some good questions come in. So first, just tell us a little bit about the book. What's the main idea behind it? Who is it for? Is it just for young women, or just for married women? Is it just for a certain type of situation in life? Or tell us a little bit more there. The Proverbs tell us that in the multitude of counselors, there is victory. Keep Wise Partners applies this to your business, building Christendom through your work. Running a small business is tough, but you're not alone.
KeepWise Partners provides expert bookkeeping and advisory services with integrity, sharing your values to help meet your goals. And look, we really believe this. We use KeepWise Partners here at New Christendom Press. So visit keepwisepartners.com or call Derrick Taylor at 781-680-8000 for a free consultation. KeepWise Partners, excellence in finance and accounting for your business. When you have a busy house, the immediate demands of activities, events, and never-ending to-do lists can overshadow critical long-term decisions. Life insurance, financial planning, education savings, and retirement are continually backburnered. Joe Garrissey and his team from Backwards Planning Financial will help you maximize financial tools, management, and strategies so you can focus on your home and have confidence for your financial future. Visit backwardsplanningfinancial.com. That is backwardsplanningfinancial.com, or call 615-767-2555 to speak with Joe to develop a plan for the future. Look, Bright Hearth listeners, my lawyers have told me that I'm not allowed to guarantee that using Indigo Sundry Soap Company products will make you more attractive, but I am guaranteeing that that is true. If you're looking for premium handmade soaps without the seed oils or other nasty hormone disruptors, then you need to check out our partners at Indigo Sundry Soap Company. You can find them at indigosundrysoap.com. And hey, if you use code Bright Hearth, all caps Bright Hearth, you get 10% off your order. So check it out and subscribe to one of their regular deliveries today.
Well, I definitely had married women in mind when I wrote it. And I just wanted them to feel like it's possible to actually communicate how they feel without having to smother those feelings.
Yeah.
Whether or not those feelings are valid, I think it's really important that women understand how to communicate them so that people can help them navigate. Is this valid? Is this not? And as a helper, especially, you want to be helping your husband. So you have to actually communicate in ways that would make him want to change if something genuinely needs to change, or just praise him. There's chapters in there on praising your husband to continue in the good works that he's walking in. But I definitely think I've used these principles for years now, counseling all sorts of women in all sorts of stages in life, especially now that, our oldest daughter is getting old enough to start understanding some of this stuff and how she should be communicating with you and me and her siblings and her friends, her teachers. So in some ways it is for all women in that it is teaching feminine techniques of communication. Mm-hmm. But I also think there's a lot that I know men who are lacking in self-control, that these principles also apply to them. So while it is targeted specifically to married women, there are things to be gained for all people that are in communication and in relationship with others. So
yeah, definitely. I think when, even going through premarital counseling recently with a young couple, and great young woman, godly mother, but I was thinking, even as I was going through the premarital counseling, of themes from chapters, bringing up different ideas, kind of getting ahead of. So I think young women, single women could definitely benefit. I know our girls, as they get old, like into their young teen years, we'll have them read it, go through it, talk about the different ideas. They get it from us all the time, but it's helpful to just, a lot of the stuff that is in the book, we've touched on in various episodes of Bright Hearth here and there, or we've, had some application that overlaps. But I find it so helpful to just have a book that I can think, this is the book that I recommend to people on this subject. And I could not think of a book on this subject for ladies. Yeah.
When I was reviewing it today, there was a chapter, I don't remember which one, but I remember it being very hard to write because it was genuinely a how-to. No, this is the next step, which is kind of boring to write.
Yeah.
So I was trying to figure out how to do that technical side of it while also being helpful. And because it's so technical, there are things we haven't talked about before because it doesn't really fit the podcast format necessarily. So
yep, there are definitely chapters in there that we haven't done. I was thinking we haven't done an episode on this at all. We've maybe touched a little bit here and there on principles, but the fine tooth, that's one of the things I appreciate about the book, is that it's very practical. We try at New Christendom Press generally with our podcasts and our books and media to be practical. Sometimes you have high level theoretical or historical or just things like that, but a lot of the time you see a huge lack in Christian theology when it comes to experiential religion, like the application of those principles, putting handles on things so people can actually identify where they're lacking or what they need to do. Like so many times, maybe you've seen this too. I have talked to someone in counseling or, and you start talking to them and it's like, you say a principle and they're like, yeah, I get that. I do that. And you're like, but no, I'm telling you that because the problem is you're not doing it. So people think because they know a principle sometimes that they're obeying it. And so often that's where the gap is. It's not that people have never heard of what they need to do. It's just that they actually haven't looked in a practical mirror to say, oh, I thought I had a gentle and quiet spirit, but I didn't.
Yeah. And I also think, first of all, you're getting morning brain Lexy with this book versus podcasting is evening brain Lexy, two totally different people. And so I was able to be more thorough where take that example of somebody that might think they were, living obediently according to this principle. I can stop in the chapter or come back after 2 days of thinking about that chapter and say, hold on, you might be tempted at this point in the conversation to do this. Let's cover that now.
Yeah.
So I do think it's more thorough than a podcast because of
Definitely. So when did you write the book? Lots of people were asking like, wait, we have 7 kids. Is Lexy like a boss babe now? And she went to her cubicle and wrote the book while the kids were sent off to nannies across the globe.
Mornings and nap times. And I've, up until the last 6 years, I've actually always had some sort of a writing job on the side. I don't talk about that much, but my degree is in English. And so I wrote for multiple newspapers and did reporting for like local newspapers and Christian magazines. And then did some content editing, which is not technical editing. I always say there's a difference because you will see my grammar is amazing. Thank you, editors. But yeah, so it's just something I genuinely enjoy. And so I've always had that time slot built into my day in a way that doesn't take away from the children. I mean, I would not have done this if it would have. I mean, even yesterday, I was like, are you sure I need to leave to do this?
I said, we'll be able to hit record right when you get there. We'll figure it out.
Everyone's always been, the pastors, the elders, they've always been really great at protecting my time. And I just appreciate it so much. Even like when Ben will say, hey, you got another email, someone wants you to speak. I told them no for you. I'm like, thank you.
I already told them no.
Please. So
it's like the answer's no.
And our kids, like we think of this as a family business. Our kids are also old enough to start pitching in by literally hanging out with a sleeping baby at home. We live up the street from the church. It's not. It's not. It's just normal.
We talked about the book when you were thinking about kind of the ideas. And you even said, like, should I do this? This is the time I would need to take. This is when, and we're like, yeah, this is, I think, necessary, and it's the right book. It's the right time. So the heart of the book, I'm thinking it's a Titus 2 type. Everything we do, me and you, and media that you're involved in, we've always been careful that we're not trying to make you a doctrinal influencer, a lady pastor kind of thing, a Beth Moore type of thing. You're not going to be releasing systematic theology Bible studies or something like that. We focus on those Titus 2. It's a broad list of things that encompasses a huge amount, right? It's not narrow in a sense, but it is narrow in a sense in that Paul's instructing older women, seasoned, mature, godly women to instruct the younger women in these things that orbit around godly womanhood. And then he appointed an office, the elder, for the doctrinal instruction of the church, and husbands even, like wives are encouraged by Paul, commanded to ask your husband at home if you have a question. So husbands and elders are appointed in these various spheres to be the ones who instruct in doctrine. This is not a book like that. This is a book that is a Titus 2 type of book. But then when I think about all of the things that go into Titus 2, it is huge. It's keeping the home. It's loving and raising children. It's being a wife and being a mother. It's being a godly young woman, and then married woman, and then older woman. There's so much that goes into it. Why did you zero in on communication? Like, why did of all the things that you could have written about in that sphere, you said this should be a book about communication in particular, words and deploying words. Why that topic? Why is that so important to godly womanhood?
Well, I think it was Nancy Wilson that I heard her once say, God made women to want to nurture relationships. And part of that is they want to talk a lot more than their husbands do. And it's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. And I just wanted people to genuinely be more effective at doing that so they could kind of fulfill that role that God gave them and also, like I said earlier, be a helper to their husbands. And honestly, a lot of this is just overflow of talking to my friends and wanting my friends to succeed at their jobs. And part of that looked like me being more effective at my job and helping them do that. And it was easier to write it down so they have a physical reminder than to have the same conversation over and over again. So I'm grateful that God used those friendships in those ways that it just is a natural overflow. And I like their marriages are way better for it. Even like there's no office of pastor's wife. You don't have like an office where you have counseling hours in the church or something like that. But simply as an older seasoned woman in the church, especially in the life of our church, younger women come to you a lot. There are a group of women in the church that we would say like, hey, that's a seasoned woman that has experience in this and marriage and children. And so you do tend to have a lot of these relationships where you're doing the one another ministry, counseling sisters in Christ. And so a lot of the chapters, I know we've had many conversations surrounding these topics. You've had a lot of experience in talking to women in the church over the years through some of these. So this isn't just the overflow of your own experience in marriage, but also of hearing what are the constant like frustrations that women are running into, or places where they're just like stepping on a rake and getting smacked in the face by what are some of those big, like there's a negative and a positive aspect of the book, a put off these things and put on these things. Okay.
What are some of those big put off these things kind of behaviors and patterns that the book addresses, and then also put on these things instead?
Yeah, I would say one big put off would be put off manipulation and put on clarity and reality and maturity.
Why is that such an issue? Like clarity and reality, you said particularly.
Because as ladies, we start to feel like our emotions and feelings are reality, and it isn't most of the time.
Like there's a gap
Yes.
between how I feel and how I'm telling myself a situation is going, and then backing up going, you talk about the 5-paragraph essay in one of the chapters.
Yeah, that's huge for me my whole life. My even teenage years, I always went back to how my mom taught me the 5-paragraph essay, and do I have supporting evidence for how I feel or not feel, and should I share it or should I not share it based on that? That was like foundational for everything for me.
It's so funny because I tend to go on Lexi's Twitter and block all of the people ahead of time as much as I can to spare her from like really nasty women that are evil and men too. But especially there's like a coven, and I think I'm using that word correctly, of catty women who they go to and fro on social media, from social media house to house, seeing what is the latest water cooler gossip and what woman they can disparage for speaking honorably about men or patriarchal Christianity or things like that. And, so I see all the time on Twitter or Facebook, women talking about Bright Hearth or talking about you or talking about us, or they'll screenshot something that you said. That's just a very straightforward, like one recently you were talking about not constantly barraging your husband with like to-do lists, but thinking about every once in a while, bring him your to-do list, but like don't every single day or every single weekend have like, hey, you're off work Friday at 5. I've got all your time booked until Monday at 7 because you're going to be fixing the cupboard and you're going to be doing this, you're going to be hanging this, you're going to be doing this. And a lot of what women tend to do with you or with me is that they read it in the most uncharitable light. And so they'll read, they'll hear you say something like that, 5-paragraph essay, making sure I have supporting arguments. And they'll be like, man, look at the tight leash that Brian has Lexy on. She can't even tell him anything like without a 5-paragraph essay. He must be beating her regularly. But what I found helpful as I was even reading the book for the first time in the early drafts of the chapters and things like that was like just how non-hysterical it is. It's just so practical. Like even I think these have particular merit for ladies, but even just as men do this too. Our emotions lie to us, and we want to catastrophize and take things in the way that makes us into the biggest victim and everybody else into the biggest aggressor. And it's not we magnify everybody else's sin. We minimize all of our own sin. So it's just such a helpful practice. I was thinking like, so practical to be able to hand that chapter to ladies struggling with this and say, look, you one of the chapter titles is Grow Up. It's a very winsome chapter title. But legitimately, grow up, but here's how. Like, here's what seasoned, mature speech looks like. So you're talking about putting off manipulation, putting on clarity, putting off catastrophizing, putting on reality. What are some of the positive, like, put on? Ladies, we hope these chapters of this book helps you to put on this virtue in communication.
I think maturity is a big one. There's times where I've had to look at a woman and say, you're just being immature. That's the only problem I see here. You have to know not to pick that fight. You have to know that's a really silly thing to ruin your entire weekend over. And it's just lack of time in your flesh, in this body that we have, lack of perspective. But I think once a woman can realize, I'm thankful that she told me that. I was being immature. It is a quick turnaround. At least in my experience with women like this, it is a quick turnaround of, you're right, that is very immature. And you can almost immediately put that to death. Yeah. Because somebody was being very clear with you about what the actual problem is, instead of beating around the bush in a, I don't know, like weird sort of a trying to be nice but not helpful way, you know?
Yeah, like indirect instead of plain speech or direct speech. Sometimes I do think ladies in counseling one another. And when I say counseling, I'm again not talking like you have to have a CCEF thing. I'm just saying like all Christians are called to counsel one another. We're called Galatians 6:1, that restoring such a one who's caught in a trespass, you are spiritual, do this work. It's not just about elders. Like every problem in the church, bring it to the elders and they'll do all of the 90+% of counseling in a healthy church happens at a sub-elder level. Friends counseling one another. So, you know, when you're in the midst of that, especially people who don't have a lot of experience in confronting sins or just being direct with people about, hey, brother or sister, I see this thing. I just noticed that you interrupt your husband constantly. And it's really disrespectful, and it's, you know, a couple social situations we've been in together. I've just really noticed that, and I could tell it really like took your husband down a couple notches, and that it was frustrating to him. Maybe you're not aware of this, but I wanted to bring it to your attention to just say you should have a better hold on your tongue and your speech in this particular area. And I love you, and that's why I'm telling you this. What I just said, the idea of having that conversation with someone to a huge percentage of Christians is so terrifying that instead of doing that, what are they tempted to do? They're ignoring it and gossiping to the other girls about it. Exactly. Going either I'm just never going to bring it up and I'm going to allow my friend whom I'm supposed to love. It's like keep falling on that, stepping on this rake and getting hit in the face with it. Because I don't love them enough to be courageous. I guess with girls, I know this is marriage, but part of it is also learning to honor your friends by being willing to be the friend that does wound them for a short time so that they can actually experience the healing on the other side of it. Yes. So that's kind of the spirit of like me talking to ladies in this book. Even in the book. Yes. It's very direct. It's not rude. It's not brash. It's not legalistic and none of that. It is just direct. It says, ladies, this is something that you might be tempted to do. And so here's why that is sinful or unhelpful. And here's what to do instead. It's very direct, very practical. And people sometimes, because they're so unfamiliar with directness, misread all directness as legalism or like a very lack of humility or arrogance and that kind of thing. And it's like, no. This is one of the biggest problems we've identified. Even, let me put it positively instead of negatively. One of the biggest virtues we've attempted to inculturate in our church, and the elders talk about this constantly, is to train Christians in our membership to embrace the small discomfort of 1,000 kind of hard conversations rather than every 2 or 3 years having one catastrophic conversation that ends relationships, blows everything up. And I mean by that, like so often we sweep things under the rug, we gossip about them, we loop everybody in who doesn't need to, and then we never address a problem until it's already destroyed everything, and then we have one big blow up fight, and then the relationship's over. Churches are destroyed by that culture. And instead, we have to get really good at just having 1,000 slightly uncomfortable conversations over the course of a couple, a relationship, until it's like, me and Ben are really good friends, and Ben can tell me something and I can tell him something and that we think is like, hey, that was, that you shouldn't have done that. Yeah, you should have.
And I think part of the key there is having the cheerful disposition immediately afterwards, to be merciful immediately afterwards. And part of that, I think I've covered this in there somewhere, is just mentally coaching yourself to move on. Either as the one being corrected or the one correcting. Like, okay, now I'm going to say it in the most gentle way I can that leads them. I know you taught me this years ago with counseling, is how can you frame it in such a way that you're leading the person to the conclusion you've already come to without having to divulge too much of their sin to them. Like you're trying to cover and honor them in the middle of correcting them and then move on cheerfully from there.
Yes.
And so it kind of does have to, you have some mental coaching as the one who's going to say a hard thing to be able to do that too.
Yes.
And
it's growing a muscle. It's like getting good at something until direct, plain, kind. It's still in kindness, still in gentleness, still all of the Christian virtues. And especially even befitting a woman. So a gentle and quiet spirit, not being brash or loud or harsh or all those things, but being direct, like being loving and direct. And I'm looking through the chapter titles, like why a book about communication. Self-control. There's a chapter on self-control. There's a chapter on wrestling your emotions, anger and manipulation. One about get out your oven mitts, which I think is about handling
your emotions at a distance.
Your emotions in a different way. Yeah, like being insulated from them. Respect. You talk about being low maintenance. There's the grow up chapter. Faithful are the wounds of a friend. You talk about praising your husband is a very specific chapter just about, again,
positive ways to communicate.
I know all the feminists are going to be like, Lexy has such a hard time praising her worthless husband that she had to write a whole chapter to herself about how to come up with ways to fake it. So I look forward to reading all of those comments online at some point. I just want to thank everybody in advance for those. There's chapters on the marriage bed, bitter water, big sin and dealing with being sinned against, waiting out emotions. I love this chapter. This is another one that I anticipate those comments about, but it's such a good chapter because it is such a common problem. A husband forgets to follow up.
Is that
it's a chapter title.
Okay.
And it's because it's so garden variety. But think about how many fights in a marriage are because a woman doesn't want to nag her husband, but she's brought something up or there's something she does ask him to do and he just forgets. He's not being malicious. Guys, I do this all the time. I am a forgetful man with certain things. And I really appreciated that chapter because it was a great example of practical instruction on how to be respectful, but also helpful. Because I want your help in remembering these things that I forget. I tell you regularly, no, I'm going to forget this. Please don't feel like you're nagging me. Do remind me. There's a chapter on staying in fellowship, meekness, and then I wrote a foreword and a closing exhortation at the bookends of the book as well. So when you hear that list, it's like they're all little chapters that I wish that I had on my hand often in the course of just ministry and just being in the midst of a Christian community where you love one another and want to help one another. Are there any chapters in that list that you think I particularly remember that thinking this is going to be a really important chapter in the book? I think it's going to be particularly helpful, or this is a very pressing issue that we've seen a lot of. Any of those?
I think I really, really do believe the biggest one that I was constantly going for was kind of teaching people the 5-paragraph essay, which when you think about education today, I understand why people just do not know how to formulate a thought and communicate at all. Yeah. Or they just cry. That's another big one is,
you did talk about that in the book.
Just crying or yelling. I'm not really a yeller when we fight, but I can tend to be a crier sometimes. So, and I think it's all in that chapter, but even writing something, if you're not concise enough to have it written down in 2 sentences, what you need to say, you need to probably sit on it for a few days to get more concise. Stuff like that, where that seemed to be the most helpful to people. So I think it will be the most helpful to the broader people out there. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Even, and in that you're talking a lot about, I know people will hear that you need to wait on it longer if you can't be concise and clear about the problem, or you need to think about it or sit down and really sift through. And people are going to hear that as oh, they don't want to hear my feelings. You're saying that women shouldn't have feelings, or they shouldn't bring problems to their husbands if they can't like do it in a cold and logical way. But it's clear when you read it that what you're actually talking about is helping women work through, where does my feeling about a subject end and the reality of the subject begin? It's not that I can't come to my husband and say, this thing really actually hurt me, or this is a real problem, but that when you do, you've done the work to think through it and say, when I tell him, it's going to be helpful because I'll be able to say, not I'm a cold, unfeeling robot, but I have really had, just I've struggled with really harsh thoughts about you this last month or 6 months because, there's just been this thing that you've done, pretty consistently. And I think it's a real problem. And it does, I want you to know, because I love you, that it has been difficult for me to work through. And that's so helpful as a husband.
Yeah.
To be able to hear, we have episodes on Bright Hearth about how to, even respectfully bringing a concern to your husband.
Yeah.
And that's why I think this is going to be so helpful. It's just a lost art.
It is to help the husband, but it also is so the woman gets what's actually bothering her out of it.
She figures it out.
If she's not being concise enough with what the problem is, she might not also be precise enough with what the solution would be.
Yeah.
So you could easily then grab for manipulation. The husband knows you're upset, so he takes you on a 10 grand vacation, but actually neglects the actual solution is maybe our schedule needs to be less busy and we hang out more.
Yep.
So that's where it's for the benefit of the woman as well.
Yeah, both.
To actually, and then if you can't get to a place of wanting a solution, you just want to be mad. And that's what a lot of people don't understand is you sometimes have to put that desire to death too of, it isn't about anything. There's nothing wrong. You delight in being mad and angry and bitter and harsh. And that's a reality too, that you might have to grapple with if you can't sit on it long enough.
Yes.
Or if you sit on it for a while and you're like, well, there's not really anything that needs to change. I'm probably the problem. I need to change.
So many of our, of our people, so many of us in general are refugees from various destructive cultures. Like, lots of families full of divorce, parents split at a young age, dysfunctional step parents, mom that was cold and distant and everyone walked on eggshells around her because she was rude and the husband was passive and never corrected it, or a hothead dad or an alcoholic, drunken, so many of us come from these backgrounds. We're certainly no stranger to that here in Ogden. All our friends and there's many stories of this kind of stuff. And what it tends to create are cultures of dysfunction that are cyclical and they just descend down through the generations, and you learn terrible bad habits of communication and marriage. You never have a good model for what a man is or a woman is. And so someone somewhere in that line has to step in and say two things. This is actually what the problems were, diagnosing them biblically and accurately and according to God's law and his word and reality. And then two, here's how I'm going to repent of it and determine to actually do that. So a lot of the work of that is actually not complicated. It's just difficult.
Yeah.
So a lot of the time in these situations, it is as simple as that. You discover that you grew up in a culture of total dysfunction, either passivity that led to a lot of just rampant sin and dysfunction, or even like aggressive, tyrannical anger and manipulation and rudeness in your family. And so it's often as simple as that was the pattern I grew up with. I was never disciplined. My flesh has run rampant. And the solution is really, I need to get over myself and learn self-control. It's not my husband. It's not a 50-step technique. I just need to stop being rude and mean. And like, it can be so hard for people to hear that because we want a technique.
You know what the technique is for ladies most of the time?
I know what you're going to say.
It's going to be quiet.
I knew it. You say that at one point in the book in a very kind way. And it's like, ladies, a lot of the time you're going to find that the solution of this pattern of sin is be silent.
I think that might be the most shocking and maybe like one of the more helpful things is to understand most of the time the solution is to just be quiet. Or if there's a valid thing you're experiencing and you are perceiving reality correctly, you don't need to bring it up 10 times, maybe once. The other 9, shut your mouth.
And and pray and
Yes, there are other things to do in place of talking about it, talking to other people about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it really is simple.
Yeah. We've inherited this culture of talk therapy where we've come to believe that the solution to our problems is largely a matter of talking about them in a certain way. If I can just get to the bottom of the problem of my inner child from when I was aged 8, or whether I'm INTJ wing 3 or whatever I am, if I can just talk my way to like the right knowledge, then I could be fixed. And then, but still I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to have to, like, it's still going to be a matter of talking about it enough.
Yeah.
Most of the time, it's actually not talking about something. It's putting off vices and putting on virtues. Like,
or if you want to talk to your husband like that, tell him, I know everything I'm about to say is not accurate. I need your help.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to word vomit for about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Or I've been doing this for the last week with 2 very trusted friends that I'm like, okay, I know I'm not seeing things accurately.
Yeah.
I know I'm postpartum.
Yeah.
I know I'm a woman. I know my family is just very busy. Help me see where I'm seeing inaccurately.
Yeah.
Help me figure out what I should be tweaking, and be kind, but also kind in a way that is telling me truth. So you can do that if you give yourself qualifications up front, like kind of like I've said before, tattling on yourself. Knowing immediately everything I'm about to say is not true. I know that. So help me see truth.
Even I think the example, I know what you're talking about, would be helpful to even talk about for a minute, because it's a great example of like this. We're in this season of lots of kids, and just one basic thing is like, how do you figure out when you have lots of kids? Like, where's the line as a homemaker and a mother between keeping the house and like doing all of the work and making sure things are in order, and just the reality that when you have when the oxen are in the stable, it's not clean. So can mom ever rest? Like, and you've done a good job in this. You've talked to me. I know you've talked to trusted ladies that have a lot of kids, like are in a similar situation, and been able to say like, can you just tell me, like, do you feel crazy all? Is it what like?
Am I being unreasonable here?
Am I being unreasonable with myself or with the kids or with like my standards? And it is like, it shows that what we're talking about is not robotic suppression of all humanity.
No.
It's just learning how to talk about these things that really do need to be talked about.
Yes.
So you can draw
because
wisdom
it's better
forth.
for me to go find wise counsel than to leave on a Saturday and never come back. Like that's the reality is that's how some women would treat it is
Totally.
I'm fed up with this. I'm done. See you later. I'm starting a new life.
And there's stories of, countless
that's why I'm
stories of women that are like, all of a sudden you see the Facebook post from someone that just said, well, my wife up and left, and husbands do the same thing too. And what you're looking at there is like, wow, they actually didn't know how to communicate and work through issues and problems, and whether in both usually in the family and the church and in the whole
I feel
web
like
of friendships.
I can do the same thing with elders. I mean, we had a situation in our family recently where we were both being pastored, not between us two. We weren't having an issue, but our family was being pastored by the elders, and I was able to be the same principles, frank and honest with the elders. And it was helpful, and it was beneficial for everyone. And it wasn't like I felt like I was hiding anything from them either,
Yep.
So.
And that's another principle that's so helpful in the communication question is like figuring out as husbands and as wives and as churchmen, what other layers of relationship do we have at our disposal, and how do those work to serve and help one another? Like, where is gossip? And there's such thing as gossip, but then also where is there, no, the Lord really did make a community of saints where he really did mean for older women and for there to be friendship of peers, for there to be mentoring relationships vertically in both directions, for there to be hierarchies of authority with elders and, other helps in the church community, and figuring out how to actually navigate those things well, and then modeling them in a community. Like, it just is so much of what Christian sanctification is made up of over time. Okay. Anything else you wanted to say about the book? Contents, things you hope women take away, what you're hoping it will accomplish? We've got some questions we can turn to.
I can't really think of anything.
Okay. Yeah. So again, recapping, a ton on communication and everything that goes into it. We're talking about emotions, we're talking about marriage, we're talking about friendship, gossip, things to put off, things to put on. They're positive aspects of the book as well. And it's pre-ordering now. This episode's going to come out on a Monday. Through this whole week, through Friday of this week, we're going to have that pre-order promotion going where all the copies that go out the door will be signed that are ordered until 11:59 p.m. on that Friday, July 11th. And you can find the book at newchristendompress.com/wisdom, or just go to our website. It's right there on the front page. Hardcover, premium book. And we hope that it's one that you're really helped by. We wanted to round it out. How long have we been going? Okay, good. We wanted to round it out with just a few questions that folks sent in. I asked, hey, we're recording an episode. Anybody have any questions about the book? Wives, you know your husband would fight for your family without hesitation, but every knight needs armor. And in today's world, that means ballistic protection made for the modern defender. Armored Republic makes real armor for real men, law-abiding citizens, fathers, husbands, protectors. Visit armoredrepublic.com. That's armoredrepublic.com, or text JOIN, all caps JOIN, to 88027 and help your husband stand strong. Hey there, friends. Let me tell you about Gray Toad Tallow. They're a family-owned small business passionate about creating skincare products that nourish your skin with pure, wholesome ingredients. For centuries, tallow has been valued for its moisturizing and healing properties, and Gray Toad Tallow is dedicated to sharing these benefits with your family. They strive to keep their products affordable and accessible, aiming to be a blessing to you and your family. Visit graytoadtallow.com to learn more and try a balm sample pack. And don't forget to use code BRIGHT15, that's all caps, BRIGHT15, for 15% off your order. Thanks for supporting this great small business. Ready to feel like yourself again? Rebecca Belch, founder of Live Oak Integrative Health, is a board-certified functional medicine provider helping women and families achieve lasting generational health. Using advanced testing and personalized care, she uncovers the root causes and builds sustainable plans for every stage of life. And Bright Hearth listeners can get $50 off any of 3 packages. So head to liveoakintegrativehealth.com to schedule your free call and make sure you tell her that Bright Hearth sent you for $50 off one of 3 packages. Looking for the gift to last 1,000 generations? Check out Rooted Pines Homestead, where they work together as a family economy to create natural wooden toys and herbal remedies. Coated with natural, whole ingredients, their toys are safe enough for the mouth of babes. Visit rootedpineshomestead.com and use code BRIGHT10, that's all caps, BRIGHT10 at checkout for 10% off your order. Link in the show notes below. Oh yeah, this is a great one. Screwtape asks, do you worry that women reading your book might start building homes where our kind can no longer speak freely? Assuming he's talking about demons. So I would say yes.
Yes. I actually, in the original title, it had something with defying demons through domesticity in there.
It did, yeah. Maybe we can use that in a future one.
Yeah.
That was really good. I think this is a great question. A lot of people in our camp, we've kind of alluded to it a little bit here, but several forms of this question. One question I've wrestled with, this is from Mark. He says, in a patriarchal home, how do you reconcile a wife writing a book to women, as I understand, and not fall into the trap of feminism and, subverting the given order and just like creating Beth Moore culture? Like, how are we thinking about that? Why do you think, why this book?
Yeah, because there's a lot of things I'm not doing. Mm-hmm. I am trying to obey Titus 2 within the actual curriculum that the Lord has given me. And there's a lot of things I'm not doing. Yeah. I mean, I looked at, there was a little section in there, the time that Jen Wilkin told me I needed to get babysitters for my kids so I could join you at the church.
At the elders meeting.
At the elders meetings. No, thank you.
Yeah.
And my tendency is often the very opposite, where I have to be coached into like, no, this is what Titus 2 does look like. This is a good calling. So my personal temptation is not necessarily towards that, but I really do feel strongly that we actually don't have enough resources that are covering the wide gamut of Titus 2 type resources. Mm-hmm. And some of that isn't necessarily bad. I mean, it is the reality that we are very, very, very busy as moms if we're doing this correctly.
Yeah.
I've told you this, I don't necessarily ever want to be a teacher at the school. I hopefully will transition into being a grandmother at some point when I probably still have kids at home. So, I don't know. I just think there's a lot of stuff that we're avoiding.
Yeah.
And I just delight so much. And I'm so thankful in being led by elders who even care about, like you guys talked about how I wouldn't be doing a book tour.
No.
And I'm just grateful because I don't even have to think about that. I don't want to have to do that.
Even the promotion of the book, you're pretty much going to see videos of me saying, my wife wrote a book. Go buy it. I think it's a good book, because you're not going to see Lexy like doing stage tours across America. Our conferences, we don't do. I mean, I'm not saying there's never a possibility that at a conference you might have a breakout just with women that's like really geared. I think that can be fine.
Yeah.
But we just haven't done anything like, hey, let's really like get our women out there as influencers. And you're not going to be doing political pugilism. You're not going to be doing systematic theology. You're not going to be doing expository Bible studies or precept studies or all of these things that historically the church has turned to. We don't have a women's ministry that's geared around lady leaders teaching doctrine to people. It's like, it is very much Titus 2, but we shouldn't, out of the fear of that, fail to actually practically equip.
And honestly, this isn't a lot. I'm thinking about this book. I'm thinking about the local church. I'm thinking about my friends, my parish, the people that I've grown up with as a mom.
Yeah.
And this is first a resource for them.
Yeah.
And part of it is going to create more free time for me in the sense of I don't have to have that conversation 5 times now because it's now written down. You go to the Lord with this and work through this.
Yeah.
So in some ways I hope it actually lessens my workload in some ways. So I can make chicken pot pies.
Yeah. Falcon asks, what age
my friend Falcon?
Yeah.
Okay.
What age would your daughters, do you think? Like what age would you say?
Well, there is a chapter or 2 on sex. So
very discreet.
Okay.
They're not, I reread it recently. It's not,
I think it would probably take an older teenager to read it alone, though I think the principles could probably start in like late elementary school, I would say.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, honestly, they can be boiled down and simplified. A 4-year-old can understand.
Totally.
You don't need to share that right now. Close your mouth.
If you are, I would say if you're wondering, like maybe you have a 9 or 10 or 11, 12-year-old, you're like, oh, would she benefit? Just read it first as a mother, knowing your daughter, and then you be the judge. I would say a lot of young ladies in that late elementary would absolutely benefit from. They're going to get different levels of it, just like any teaching, but would benefit from a lot of it. But certainly teens.
That would be a good book to write towards little girls because we are in that season, and it's hard to find resources that want to coach them specifically on feminine characteristics.
And that are written to them.
Yeah. And I've talked about this with Pastor Kevin Griffin, who does, I've just always had an interest in psychology and counseling my whole life, for better or for worse. And Pastor Griffin does the counseling here.
Yeah, he's
and
our
so
counseling
I've helped him kind of do some of the women's resources. And that's something him and I are always talking about is there's just a huge lack in teaching positive feminine traits and how to grow in that. So
absolutely. It's a huge hole.
Yeah.
In the resources, because a lot of them are either so high-minded principle and they never come down to reality, or they fall into the trap that basically they make it seem like there is nothing distinct between the piety of men and women. And that's just not true.
We're the ones that do talk about female piety, elevate the female nature over the male nature because they are like naturally less sinful, which is not true.
Or they make it all about like just things that both men and women would benefit from, which is like devotional time and reading the scriptures and prayer. And those are all important, but failed to talk about but ladies, really, there's a reason that the woman folly in scripture is a loud woman. Why
more particular to their...
They aren't particular. They don't get down into the weeds. Falcon also asked if there were parts of the book that you thought were more challenging to write. You mentioned at least one aspect of it, I think, already.
The chapters on sex I felt were necessary, but hard to figure out how to navigate.
Yeah, those in general, it's hard to figure out how to talk. Eric and I had a conversation about this recently.
Yeah.
Even pastorally.
And I find that easier to do one-on-one. So that was a little tricky. And then some of the chapters that really were more step-by-step how-to is just harder to write. So
you need to think so practically. On the marriage bed questions, it's like you identify that the problem is that really the domain for the most pointed teaching on this actually isn't generally supposed to be in God's design a book or a podcast. It's actually supposed to be a father and a mother.
Yes.
So if you've ever done premarital counseling as a pastor, you know that the difference between a son or a daughter who's been fathered and mothered really well when it comes to like marriage bed stuff is that you can say, oh, go, you've talked to your dad about this. Great. Good conversations. Do you have any questions? A great father, those have been covered. The pastor doesn't need to get really that into the weeds with it. Same with a young woman. Her mother has already talked to her about this. But since we have such a fatherless and motherless culture, there's this awkward place where it's like we need resources, but also and the encouragement I'm making here is that if Christians, these are conversations that are really most effectively had in the context of friendships and localism.
Yes.
So don't be scared to bring a question in person to a trusted mentor on those topics, and don't just rely on books and things like that. You've already mentioned this a little bit, but the questions, Virginia asked this questions about how you prioritize time while being pregnant, managing your household, and taking care of, 6, now 7 kids, writing a book. Anything else you'd add? You wrote it again, like in the morning before kids were up, and then also during nap time.
I wrote it
Anything
over
else?
Period of like 3 or 4 months, I think it was. I was pregnant at the end, which is why I finished it.
Yes.
So quickly.
Yeah, it was like, we're pregnant, but it's either going to need to be shelved for a while or.
Yeah. I think one of the things women, if you feel really overwhelmed, all you can kind of think about is getting the basics done. And once you have enough habits and routines in place that the basics are done and cared for, it does help you understand, do I have enough flex to grow my capacity? So I think for me, when it comes to projects like this, or maybe other ministry projects, like working through like Titus 2 curriculum with a friend, last year we were doing that for St. Brendan's. I do have those 2 time slots a day that I can kind of spend freely how I want to write or read or whatever it is. So that's just like an overflow of the rest of the time discipline, the discipline to get up, the discipline to work out, because then I have energy to want to get up in the morning and write. The discipline to have, those times during the day where I pick up things so that I don't have to spend all of nap time cleaning. All of those little things add up to continue to grow your capacity as a woman. And I think that's how God designed it, is that all of that would be an overflow of the underlying virtue. Yeah. Instead of, like I was reading in Matthew today, just about the hypocrites. They're only doing it for when people see them. Yep. So I would hope that this is really just an overflow of all of the underlying virtue and habits that the Lord's helped me to cultivate over the years. Because I told you this is the least sexy book I would have ever imagined myself writing. No, it's very There's nuts other books I would much rather write than this, but I knew that this was necessary. And part of this is just being a writer. I don't know if you feel the same, but when there's been things that I know I need to write, the Lord kind of gives me the outline. 100%. And so in some ways it's easy to do that because I know what needs to be said and neglected. Yep. And it flows a lot faster. So, I mean, I have another book that's been sitting in my folder for, 3 or 4 years now. And I don't think that's a book I'll probably ever write, but it was something I kind of wanted to write, but I don't think it is a book that needs to be written. So it's just different. I don't know if that answers the question.
No, that did. That's good. I thought this next one was a really good question from Rachel, and I'll read the subtitle again so that we can remember we get it right. But I'm a little confused about the relationship between the first and second halves of the subtitle. Can you clarify or expound on how the title reflects the scope and intent of the book? Mm-hmm. And the subtitle, again, to refresh everybody's memory, I just got to pull it up. Here it is. Tips for getting back your weekends and holidays. That's the first half. And learning to communicate effectively in marriage. Okay. So to me, it's totally obvious because we've talked about this a lot.
It's because you counsel people more than the average. Uh-huh. If you've never counseled somebody regularly, you have no idea how many fights are starting Friday night and Christmas Eve.
Why?
Because all the maturity has entered the room. All the immaturity has entered the room.
They're together.
And it's often a stressful time.
Yeah.
Like holidays, very stressful. Mom's trying to pull a lot out of her back pocket on little sleep. Dad might have not been aware that she wanted to save that bacon for the next morning. And then there's a huge blow up and the entire holiday season is ruined. It is a reality. It's not even funny.
So how many fights start in marriages? We notice this pattern. When you're together. So when does that happen? In the evening when you should have great time together.
Yeah.
Or especially Friday evening going into the weekend or a holiday. You've been at work, you've been busy, you get together and all of a sudden your sins are there too. You don't know how to communicate effectively. And so you just waste. It's ironic because a lot of times couples fight about not spending good time together.
Yeah.
But then all the time they spend fighting about not having good time together.
Yeah.
So the way they relate is that the communication help, the advice and counsel on communicating well is intended to help you get that time back so that you can now enjoy your Saturday with your wife and not spend it like, are you okay? I'm fine. I'm fine. Are you sure? It seems like you're mad about something. No, I'm totally fine. I hope you really have a good time going golfing this morning. After we didn't see each other all week, I really hope you enjoyed that. While I pick up the whole house. It's like how many fights are that?
Yep.
And you get to the bottom of it and I don't dislike this aspect of ministry. This is just an aspect of ministry. Get a lot of calls at 9 p.m.
It's not like you're there, you're present to help no matter what day it is. It just is funny though.
But if you're not
doing it regularly, you might not pick up on that pattern.
Yeah, totally. Especially if your marriage is good and you don't generally fight.
Yeah.
But it'll be 9 p.m. I'll get a call and someone, hey, we're fighting about something and put me on speakerphone. Let me talk to everybody. Or, sometimes even let me come over. And, so often, and people will admit this by the time you're done with the whole process, what we were fighting about was dumb. It was literally he ate the bacon in the fridge kind of conversation that he should have known was for Sunday morning.
Do you remember the story in the book?
Which one was it? Oh, the one about the trash?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, I won't spoil it.
Yeah.
It's a real example. But it's about something dumb and insignificant, but because it's not about that. It's actually that people are failing to love one another well in how they talk and relate to one another. So if you can figure that out, you'll get, you know what, your Friday nights are going to be lit. Your marriage bed's going to be a rockin' and you're going to have a lot of good time together with the kids the next day, because how much easier is it to have a great Saturday when your wife's not mad at you or your husband's not mad at you for being mad at him for being mad at you about not knowing what they're mad about. You know what I'm saying? So I think people now hopefully understand.
There's the subtitle.
Yeah. Okay. Last question. Would you recommend this as a book to go through together with other ladies? And if so, how would you organize? If you were organizing a small group of ladies to go through the book, how would you set it up? Because I think the answer is, I think it'd be great for that.
Yeah, I think so. Yes, I do think it would be a good setting for something like that. If there isn't an older lady there necessarily that you feel like you can look up to facilitate, I definitely think it's okay to, a lot of the way I've actually led book discussions is just literally saying, I'll create an outline, a timeline for reading.
Yeah.
And then we'll get together and I'll say what stood out to you, what didn't. And that's kind of what the discussion surrounds. It can be hard though. Just be aware if you feel like you are a younger woman who doesn't necessarily have a lot of ministry practice under her belt, to keep tight reins on the conversation, because it can divulge sometime, especially given the topic and the content. You have to ask yourself for real if you're willing to be the person to ask your friend to stop oversharing about her husband. Has your husband given you permission to talk to me about that? To talk to the wider group about that?
To talk to all 20 ladies here. You're right. That's one of the big dangers in that. Yes. I think it can be very helpful.
Yes.
But you do need to be aware of that.
And you also have to know your church. Is your church ready for a book like this?
Sure.
Because I can think of older wise women in my life that joined book groups that a book I would have totally agreed with, but they were being a little more broad with who they invited. So a lot of it was just arguing and not edifying. So you also have to be realistic about, should I invite so-and-so who is totally egalitarian and works full time and ships her kids off to a school out of state?
He's going to hate everything.
Not. Yeah. So
if a lot of people in your church think that we are evil legalists, then maybe just enjoy it in your home.
Yeah, let the joy in your own home kind of be the apologetic, so that when they come and ask why, because they get curious. I mean, I was talking to you about this. I'm like, I know when people are curious about our family, they're like, how does this all work?
Yes.
Then you can kind of point them to resources like that and say, these are some of the principles that have really helped us thrive in a marriage with a lot of children,
It is funny. People often, I think this is being charitable with some of the like ladies that really hate us and men too that really hate us. I think that in many cases they had an experience or multiple experiences or exposure to some subculture that was very conservative or something, maybe even patriarchal or something, and then and it was some aspects that were genuinely bad or like had nothing to do with how we actually operate or our church or home or community or family, that sort of thing. And then they hear some of the same things from us and they think they must be also exactly like that.
Yeah.
And he must, really hate his wife and secretly hate women and not, just rule with an iron fist. And Lexy must really be crying out for help with all these chapters, about sins that husbands commit or whatever.
Wait.
And you don't worry, I'll block them all. You won't have to see any of it. But it is, I get a little chuckle out of it when I read those things, because I know firsthand, not just our family, but the church is just so. We're considering even doing next year's conference, the New Christendom Conference, something like about ordinary, like being ordinary, because being normal, because so much of our culture, the evil of it has been that we're not normal anymore. We're extremely debauched and sinful and dysfunctional. And so to the extent that you become a well-ordered home and church and community and full of friends and things like that, one of the abiding characteristics will just be that it's like, these are normal people.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, there was an example once. I had a husband come to the church. They weren't members or anything, but they asked like, well, I can't quite figure out where are the women's Bible studies? Like, where do you meet? Where do you do that? Because it just seems like you guys all knit and read books. And I asked him, I was like, well, we were actually studying just war theory through a Shakespeare play yesterday. Is that what you mean by studying theology? Because if that's what you mean, then I'm totally for that. But if you want me teaching your wife verse by verse through Exodus, I'm probably not going to do that.
No, like that's Sunday.
Yeah.
The pastors do that.
And I just say that because I think people have this view of what women must be like at our church, uneducated, not theologically astute, maybe don't even know how to read a book.
It's so dumb.
So, and that's just not how it is.
Our ladies, because it's not that because they don't get together and have one of the ladies teach expository Bible studies, that they just have really dull minds.
Yes.
Instead, they get together and they're like, let's discuss what we learn about medieval Christianity from Kristen Lavren's daughter. And, let's discuss what just war theory from Shakespeare, because they're interested in the world. They're not trying to be something God didn't call them to be. And so they're free to actually be what God did create and call them to be.
Which is more interesting for its kind.
Much more interesting.
Yeah.
And it's much more rich and much less forced and artificial and canned. It's just normal people being men and being women and families and kids and all of that. And just being friends and brothers and sisters. And it's great. Like it's so much fun. And there is so little drama around it. So little drama. Low drama. One of the things that limits drama in a church I found?
What?
Not putting a bunch of women in charge of ministries.
What was this last question again?
I actually can't even remember.
About a group setting. Yeah.
Yeah, group setting. I forgot.
I mean, I have so much to say about this, but this is probably not the episode.
Well, maybe we'll talk about it in a future. Take a voice memo when we're done.
Okay.
Yeah, it's actually been a long episode already. We'll go ahead and sign off for now, but we'd be honored if you picked up a copy of the book. Thanks to everybody that pre-ordered. I've said this before, a small publishing company like us, pre-orders help us so much since we're ordering and getting all of our inventory ahead of time. It's, often tens of thousands of dollars in costs up front before we ever even see, get the book in our warehouse. And so folks pre-ordering, I know that it's not as fun to order the book and wait 2 weeks to get it. But we appreciate it. Really helps us out. And so, yeah, we'll be sending out signed copies for every copy ordered through the end of the week of July 11th. So pick up a copy. We do pray that it's a blessing to your family and your church and your marriage. And there is also on the page to order it, you'll see a note here. I just don't want anybody to miss it. There's a code that if you want to order 5 or more, like if you do want to do a Bible study, not a Bible study, if you want to do a small group all together, there you go. Put a dunce cap on my head in post there, Evan. If you want to do a group of ladies reading it together, there's a group of you in your church that want to read the book or even just have it. There's like a 20% discount, a 15%. It's a pretty good discount to order 5 or more.
For your daughter's hope chests.
Hope chests, there you go. And it's a sewn binding hardcover, so it's not going to fall apart. It'll last there for you. And I think it's bulk 15, all caps, bulk 15. If I'm not mistaken, gets you 15% off if you order 5 or more. That's on the page there. We hope that you guys enjoyed this episode. We hope even more that you enjoy the book. And we'll catch you next time on Bright Hearth, but you won't see us next time on Bright Hearth. You'll just hear us as usual. And we'll see you there.